What is up, guys? This is Kyurem from the Trinity of Lift, and today I'm actually bringing you guys a second deck profile, which is something I haven't done before. And this second deck profile will be of Satellarknights for this brand new July 2015 format. Now, I actually picked up the Satellarknight core a couple of days ago, actually, for a pretty good deal. So, because of that, I was like, heck, why not? I have the deck core, and I got it for fairly cheap. Why not make the whole deck and just bring it to you guys today? Now, I should say this is a disclaimer. It really isn't the most different Satellarknight deck profile. It's just something that I threw together based on what I've seen with Satellarknight trends, as well as just looking at some lists that did good in things like nationals and whatnot. So again, it isn't really the most spectacular Satellarknight profile, but it is one that worked, and it is one that I am happy with. So let's get right into it, starting off with the main deck, of course. Alrighty, so first off, we have the 3 copies of Satellarknight Deneb, because Deneb is the abusable Stratos. We have to have 3 of it, because it is, again, an abusable Stratos. So of course we have to have 3, because getting 3+1s over and over is really strong. Following that, we have our big power play guy, which is our 3 copies of Altair. Now, Altair is, again, like I said, the power play of this deck. He is the one that can constantly keep getting you back Satellarknights from your grave. Preferably Deneb, but usually sometimes you can do Vegas into other Satellarknights as well to get your 3 material plays going. So, of course, we have to also have the 3 Altair, because he is another essential combo piece that we have to run at 3. Next up, we have our 2 copies of Satellarknight Vega, because Vega is, again, ways to get us into our 3 material XYZ plays. And I really didn't like 3 Vega, because 3 Vega is way too much in my opinion. Nor did I like 1 copy of Vega, because you want to actually have Vega in your hand that is searched by Deneb most of the time, as only having 1 Vega forces you to constantly loop it with Altair. And there are times when you just cannot keep looping it with Altair, and you'd rather open your plays with a normal summon of Vega. So that is why I found that 2 copies was just right for me. Next up, we have our 2 copies of Satellarknight Unuko to help us set up our grave by dumping our Denebs and whatnot, so that our Altair plays can be even more good. So that is why we do have the 2 Unuko. Finally, for the last Satellarknight monster we do run, we have the 1 copy of Alsam, because Alsam can help us poke for damage. He can really help us in time, and he is just another name, essentially. So, of course, we have the Alsam just to give us a little bit more Satellarknights to see. Finally, for the last couple of monsters, we have our 2 copies of Effect Veiler. This is here obviously because Effect Veiler is still a very relevant hand trap in this format, as Nekros is still probably going to be a deck. So having the 2 Veiler to combat things like Nekros of Trishula is also really strong. Alrighty, so that should round off our monster lineup. Moving on to our spells, we start off with the 3 copies of Rhoda, because this is a warrior deck. We have to run Rhoda at 3, obviously. So we have 3 Rhoda, again, no explanation really needed. Then we have our 2 copies of Satellarknight Skybridge. Now, what Skybridge does is it makes your bad hands good, and it makes your good hands even better. As there are games, I should say, when you might just open like 1 Satellarknight Vega or 1 Nuclear, and usually for your first turn that isn't really optimal, as you're not progressing towards the game state that you want to be in as fast as you can. So that is why we do have the 2 Skybridge to help us alleviate those slower hands a little bit more, and so that we can get our Denebs even quicker on our first turn more often. So that is why we do have the 2 Skybridge. Next up, we have 3 copies of Patrick Hoban, obviously, because 37 card decks are more consistent innately than 40 card decks. So that is why we do have the 3 Upstart Goblin to just maximize our consistency. Then I decided to actually mainboard 2 copies of MST. The reason being is that I feel like Satellarknights can get floodgated fairly easily with things like Vanity's Emptiness and Skill Drain. So I really didn't want to take an auto loss to those big name floodgates, so that is why I felt that mainboarding the MSTs was the right call. Again, so I just don't take auto losses against the big decks and their big floodgates. Finally, we have 3 more spell cards, and they're all just very strong one-ofs. We have the 1 copy of Raigeki, the 1 copy of Book, and the 1 copy of Soul Charge. Raigeki and Book are fairly self-explanatory. They're pretty much a staple in almost every deck. And then we have the 1 Soul Charge to help us get into our big plays, either being our Ongamiad plays or our Trivair plays. So, of course, having the Soul Charge just as another revival outlet is always just going to help us keep looping our Altairs and whatnot. So that will round off our spells. Moving on to our trap cards, we have our 3 copies of Stellar Nova Alpha. Alpha is just really, really strong. It's probably the best trap in the deck by far, as Alpha can negate anything that activates almost. So, of course, having the Alpha to just stop our opponent's plays, tribute off a Satellarknight on our field to set up our altairs, and then just draw one is just really, really good, as it just does so many things for the deck. Next up, we have our 4 generic revival trap cards in the form of 3 copies of Call of the Haunted, and then 1 copy of Oasis of Dragon Souls. Now, we have the calls and the Oasis, obviously, to just get our cards back from our grave, as these essentially act as even more copies of Altair. Again, it just keeps getting us our Satellarknights over and over and over, and that is probably the best thing to keep doing in this deck, and just trying to keep looping Trevers. So that is why we have these 4 cards also. Moving on, we have our 2 copies of Breakthrough Skill. Now, I should say that these probably should be Fiendish Chains, as within Satellarknight, your main deck monsters aren't really all that big. So having just more defense is always really, really nice. But the sad part is I don't have Fiendish Chains on me, so I just have to settle really for the 2 Breakthrough Skill. I will say this though, that I'm not complaining for the fact that Breakthrough Skill can stop things like Dark Law or Unicore, and they also have that utility where they can be used twice. So of course, I'm not really complaining. I would prefer Fiendish Chain over Breakthrough, but as of right now, Breakthrough is doing just fine. Finally, we have 5 more trap cards, and these are all the limited strong trap cards. We have the 1 copy of Solemn Warning, we have the 1 copy of Ring of Destruction, the 1 copy of Vanity's Emptiness, the 1 Bottomless Trap Hole, and then finally we have the 1 Torrential to round off the trap lineup. Of course, obviously, these are all just very, very strong trap cards. They're all at 1, obviously, for good reason, so that is why we have to run them in this very back row heavy deck. Alrighty, so that will wrap up our main deck. Moving on to our extra deck, we start off with 2 copies of Satellarknight Trever, because Trever is the best one. It is a field-wide compulse that is also a pseudo-mind crush, in that you can just rip a random card out of your opponent's hand. So just having that ability to just neg very extra deck heavy decks, as well as to stop our opponent's key plays by hopefully hitting the most important cards out of their hand, is just of course really, really good for this deck. And of course Trever floats, so that's also a benefit. Next up, we have the 1 copy of Satellarknight Deltaros. Now, I never liked 2 copies of Deltaros for the fact that Deltaros is essentially just a fallback option when your Trever plays might not be the most impactful, as you really never will want to Trever if your opponent might only have like 1 or 2 cards on board. So really that isn't all that much worth to Trever the board, and rather it's probably better to just make Deltaros for that spot removal. So that is why I have the 1 Deltaros as a fallback option, and that is why I pretty much never will be running 2. So again, we have the 1 Deltaros. Finally, for the last Tellarknight XYZs we do run, we have the 1 Stellarknight Constellar Diamond and the 1 Tellarknight Ptolemaios. Now, these guys are here obviously because they can absolutely devastate the Burning Abyss and Shaddoll matchups. And of course, those decks are still running around in the meta because they didn't get hit all that much, or excuse me, they didn't get hit at all. So just having ways to combat those decks with these 2 cards is always really helpful. Next up, we have the 1 copy of number 86 Heroic Champion Rungamiad, because this deck can make him with a very high amount of materials. So if you can make Rungamiad with 4 or 5 materials fairly consistently in a deck, you should be running him, because his effect, I hear, is pretty crazy, is probably the best word I can think of to describe it. Going into the other rank 4s, we have 1 copy of Bujinte Tsukuyomi to get you through your deck, as well as to help you get Satellarknights into your graveyard. Then we have the 1 Constellar Omega to help us protect our Stellarknight Constellar Diamond, and just to have a general card to use to poke through multiple back row. Then we have the 1 Gagaga Cowboy to poke for game and whatnot. We have the 1 Daigusto Emerald to help us recycle our Stellarknights, which we can go through quite fast. We have the 1 copy of Castil the Sky Blaster Musketeer for just general removal and spinning back the deck. We have the 1 number 80 Rhapsody in Berserk to stop our opponent's Necroz's Mirrors by preemptively banishing them and whatnot. We have the one Heroic Champion Excalibur to deal with the Apocalypse Towers Turbo deck, which is actually becoming a thing. And in my opinion, that deck is extremely evil. So of course, it's always good to have a Towers out. Then we have the one copy of Evil Swarm Satellarknight to neg our opponents really, really hard if they ever get a lot of advantage. And then finally, to round off the extra deck, we have the one copy of number 103 for that Clayford matchup yet again. Alrighty, guys, so I guess that does wrap it up for this brand new Satellarknight deck profile for this brand new July 2015 format. I hope you all did enjoy as usual, and as always, this is Kyurem from the Trinity of Lift, and I'll see all of you guys later. Peace out.